Hi, my name is Tiffany Banks, and this project is for Nursing Leadership and Management for Morehead State University, NURB 461. I watched the film John Q, starring Denzel Washington as John Q and Robert Duvall. The director, Nick, actually mimicked this movie for his daughter that had a congenital heart defect, and so he made this movie in relation to the struggles that they had to go through with her. But John Q is is based upon a movie that is about healthcare insurance and the struggles that one particular family went through with their son Michael. At the very beginning of the movie, it kind of sets the scene. There's a lady that's driving erratically on the freeway. She's in a hurry. She keeps looking at her watch. She's passing every vehicle that she's coming up behind, and she ends up colliding with a vehicle, and air support ends up being there, and it just kind of stops there. And then it goes starts with John Q, which I mentioned before is Denzel Washington, and his wife and his son are all sitting at the breakfast table. And John Q is a factory worker, of which his hours have been cut from 40 hours to 20 hours. And his wife is a waitress, and she's only been working for a couple of weeks. But they're struggling to make ends meet, and her car ends up getting repoed in the process of them trying to eat breakfast. But their son Michael is very involved with baseball, and they're at a baseball game one evening. And he hits the ball, he runs to first base, and he's going to second base, where he collapses on the baseball field. So John Q and his wife rush out to the field, and they take him to the local emergency room. Well, upon going to the emergency room, they find that their son Michael has cardiomyopathy and is in congestive heart failure. So the head cardiac surgeon and the director of the hospital take John Q and his wife and give them options that they have, and their options are only two. One, to put their son Michael on the heart transplant list and hope that he gets a recipient, or two, take him home and let him pretty much pass away, because without the heart transplant he won't be able to live. So John Q and his wife decide that the heart transplant is the answer. However, John Q's insurance doesn't pay the amount of money that is needed to fully cover this type of operation, and they have to come up with $75,000 in order to even place their son on the heart transplant list. So in efforts to trying to raise $75,000, they start selling his truck, and they sell all of their assets out of their home, and they end up coming up with $30,000, but it's still shy from the $75,000 that they originally need. So the hospital is going to discharge Michael home. Well, the wife, his mom, is very upset and erratic, and she's telling John Q he needs to do something. So what he felt, he was left with no choice. He got a gun, and he ended up getting the cardiac surgeon and holding the emergency room hostage. And his demands were he would let everybody go when Michael's name was on the transplant list. And that was kind of his efforts to call out to the hospital director as well. Then Robert Duvall comes into the picture because he's the head negotiator, and he's trying to talk, John Q to letting these people go. And to make kind of a long story short, the media end up getting coverage inside of the emergency room, and they're hearing conversations between John Q and his wife, and then more importantly John Q to his son, and talking about how he was going to to save his life. And the media really starts pouring their heart and emotions into the scenario that's going on, and John Q ends up becoming a hero during this whole process. During this whole thing, the lady at the very beginning of the movie ends up being the recipient that Michael needs in order to survive. But in this meantime, the hospital director had put Michael on the heart transplant list because she too had heard the conversation between John Q and Michael, and she placed him on the list, and that is why this lady, she ended up being his donor. They matched blood types and everything. But during this time, the wife is trying to talk to John Q and say, our son has a recipient, but John Q doesn't know this, and in the meantime, he is going to kill himself in order to save his son's life. Now, at the kind of towards the end of the movie, he doesn't end up killing himself, but Michael ends up living. He gets the heart transplant. He's healthy. And, of course, John Q has to suffer the repercussions in the end for his actions, trying to save his son's life. But this movie really kind of duplicits what a lot of Americans go through on a daily basis with healthcare insurance. Whether they have no insurance or they have healthcare insurance, but it doesn't cover all, it doesn't cover the costs and stuff that they need, and there has to be so much money out of pocket that patients have to come up with. I see a really big problem in the field that I work in as being a nurse for 5 years on a medical surgical unit is with our diabetes patients. I continually see some of the same patients coming in because they can't afford the insulins or the medications or the supplies that are needed at home because they have to pay so much out of pocket. Or a lot of these patients just simply don't have health care insurance. And so they are coming in and they have DKA, they're in renal failure, they have these non-healing ulcers, uncontrolled hypertension, and it just is a continual process all over again. And I also had a patient one time that had a stroke and needed rehab, but was unable to get into a rehab facility because he had no insurance. But because he had done some charity work at a local rehab facility, that rehab facility decided to let him go and get his rehab there, to help him rehabilitate from his stroke. And the caseworkers really struggle and work really, really hard to try to provide needs for these patients at home. It just, the healthcare costs are rising, and people's insurance coverage either keeps climbing and they have to start stepping down on the type of plans that they have, or they simply just can't afford healthcare coverage at all. They lost their job, or their jobs cut their hours in half. And that was part of the problem in this movie with John Q, is where he had been working for, the 40-hour work week, and they had cut him down to 20-hour work week. His healthcare insurance also changed. And you do see that a lot with patients that are coming in and out of the hospital. Trying to just assist them and try to keep them afloat with all of their medical needs. And diabetes, I have to say, is probably one of the worst. I'm seeing that renal failure as well. A lot of the immigrants that are coming in have no health care insurance, and they're end-stage renal disease, and they're going to need to have hemodialysis set up, the 3 days a week outpatient. But once again, without the health care insurance, then a lot of these hemodialysis places aren't willing to accept them as patients. And so the hospital is kind of stuck on what to try to do. And I've seen that I know our hospital in particularly has been trying to get the emergency Medicaid for these patients. And it's only a short-term insurance plan, and the patient has to keep getting reevaluated for it. But at least it's a step in the right direction to try to help get them on some sort of insurance plan. But this movie, it was really drama-filled. It's a great movie to watch. It really kind of it really shows that there are a lot of people that struggle day to day, and probably with these same dilemmas and decisions that this family had to face. My dad doesn't have health care insurance either. So it's really difficult for when he gets sick. But it's something that I hope that will change in the future, and that it will get better for everyone. And just really trying to help these patients that have no insurance, or who have the insurance but need the extra assistance with their health care costs. I hope that as our future grows, that this will hopefully get better and not continue to get worse. So thank you very much.